Welcome to episode 714 of Salsido Paranormal. I'm your host, James Salsido. I'm here, as always, on the Saturday recordings with my co-host, Jen, the Arcane Observer, and we are continuing our conversation about caves and the paranormal. So, that's been great so far, and let's bring Jen into the show here. Thank you again for being here, Jen.
No, thank you, James. Yeah, it seems like we've been talking a lot about cryptids, but there's probably a lot of haunting stories too. Just people maybe experiencing it. I mean, I think the jinn, like the genies and things like that, in some regions, but is it more widespread than that? Is it intercontinental? So I don't know, but I know you came across a lot of really cool stories when you were researching it.
Yeah, so there's that one that I just mentioned at the end of the last episode over in Italy where people have reported seeing sort of like what they say in the article here, ghostly forms. I'm guessing just apparitions, but in the water. And then also hearing strange melodious singing that beckons them to come closer. So I think that's what they were talking about there with sirens. I wonder if they mean that in the mythological sense, or if they're just sort of using that to describe what regular spirits do, or I don't know. It's that's all it really says in that section. But of course, there's a lot of mythology. I mean, sirens are a mythological figure as well in other parts of the world. So so there's that. But there's also here this next one. This article mentions is in Yucatan, Mexico, and it is Lalton Cave. And let's see what this one says. So it's it has a major significance for the people that lived in the area, which were the Maya, says. And the cave has paintings and artifacts that suggest it was used for rituals and sacrifices, as you mentioned in the first episode there, Jen, on this. Says that people today often have the sense of a presence being there with them, and some report seeing figures in ancient clothing wandering around the dark corridors. So yeah, there's places all around the world that have histories and reports of sightings of various things there.
Jeez, like it seems like I know it sounds a little negative, but like it seems like there's some type of species that's slinking below the surface, in these water systems that are connected. Like I posted that Jacob's Well link, and that's connected to like a Trinity Aquifer, which covers like this. It's one. I think it's. I have to look at the article, but it covers this vast amount of land in Texas. The concept that there is something living in there, I mean, or in the Yucatan, or in Africa, or around the world, all connected through these cave systems. There might be anything occupying it. And then in these cultures that we have these sacrifices being practiced. And for some reason, it's people, or even in Africa, now in the Demifik, it's like it's animals as well. It's anything of value being offered up. But the fact that the people are even making sacrifices to it is really interesting. It's kind of like with the Delphi Oracle situation, like where there was a python there, and that people could talk to it. And then the idea of the Adam and Eve story, that there was a talking serpent, or any of that, if there's anything to all that mythology, and then the Nagas and everything. But that the people, at some point, were communicating with these creatures. There's some type of connection with them. Just on that aspect alone is really interesting, that maybe, I don't know what to make of that, but it seems to be kind of in the Afik mythology, it's kind of like, and it's EFIK, it's sort of like it's God and the devil in the same creature, as they perceived it. But it's terrifying to think about. But on a positive note, I guess there must be some kind of positive note. Actually, I can't think of one in this instance. But like the idea that it's really interesting. But clearly there is something to it in the ancient mythologies. And just the haunted cave systems in general, that they're a type of like a sort of an oral history of some type of ancient rulers in a way that live that are kind of a warden of these regions. And so in connection with people in that regard, about guarding these particular areas. But it does get a little dark when talking about the serpents in the water, and that can't be helped. I mean, that's just something that people themselves are reporting, and it's just so strange to think that the culture, like in the Yucatan or in Africa or in any region in the world, that they were on good terms as long as they kind of gave a little something back. It's really strange.
Yeah, it is, and there's just this idea of presences. Even if there's nothing there you can see physically, of this still feeling something there is amazing too. I mean, if you think about the material and we go back to this a lot with other shows too, the materials that make up caves in some cases, and then the water that can flow through them, all these things that might have that can have energy around them. To me, also means it can help with maybe generating a presence or enhancing a presence of whatever is there as well. So there's that as well. This article on the different creatures, it has like two or three, I think three so far I've found, different mentions of Africa. So there's a lot going on there with Africa. It goes from, let me see here. I had a couple here and I lost it. But yeah, just a couple here. The Jabba Fafi, J apostrophe BA, and then FOFI. This is. Oh wait, let me see here. Am I in the right one? Let me see here. Oh yeah, this is actually this is in Africa, in the African Congo. But what's different about this one is here you have another trope in fiction and fantasy and all that is, of course, spiders, which, yeah, I know a lot of people do not care for those at all. I'm very lucky in one way in that I can't really see them very well when they are near me, so that sort of has made it easier to deal with them. But these giant spiders that have, and the article mentions too that the reports of giant spiders come from all around the world, and there are some spiders that are pretty big. Of course, I think this article means more like giant, like massive, like human size or bigger. But they mentioned that this being living in Africa there, according to people in the region, this giant spider, actually it's multiple, it's just a species of them. They'll make giant webs, circular webs at ground level, and crouch in the middle of them, and they'll catch birds and rodents and even forest antelopes. So that's a good sized animal that they're taking in. There's more here on these on all these creatures, but that was one of them that I noticed. The other one is, let's see here. It's called a Groot slang, and this is in the Northern Cape part of South Africa, and it's somewhere in a vast desert system there, and apparently there is a bottomless pit. And again, we talked about this before. A place where the entire system has not been explored because it goes so far and so far down. And it says here in this article, being known as an entity or creature known as the Groot slang is supposed to come out from the cave system and lure prey back to its lair. And it's supposedly, now this is a different something altogether. It's shaped like a monstrous elephant with the tail of a snake. So that's different. It usually feeds on trespassers and again fiercely guards a stash of thousands of diamonds and gemstones, which is another thing that you hear about in just culture and fiction, and the idea of a dragon guarding a whole treasure of natural treasures, really natural valuables there is amazing as well, and to see that in a different part of the world. So I don't know if you ever heard of any of those, Jen.
I mean, I've heard things relating to it, you know, just the archetype of dragons guarding treasures and stuff like that. That's really interesting. I was looking at these. Okay, so the cave system, it's in Turkey, and it's Derin Kuyu, and it's located in the Cappadocia, I think is how you pronounce it, and it's like 280 feet deep. I'm just reading this from UNESCO, and it could house up to 20,000 people. But imagine something like 300 feet underground and large enough to house a small town of people. And then just to think about, well, I've thought a great deal about it, but like the idea of why they would do that, but that there would be things definitely that would inhabit those dark tunnel systems. And so I think the cryptids are off the hook with the whole cave conversation. As far as the haunted cave system idea, I would think if there were people or there were entities that were involved in this, kind of like with the church in Labiala. I think it's or Labiana. How does it say Labiala? It's that it wasn't even made by people. The local mythology is that it was built by these nocturnal angels, or what the locals in Ethiopia refer to it as. And so you have like this, even that idea. I mean, they're saying right there that but it had to be a physical being of some kind, you would think. But to be able to actually make such incredible structures. But I do think haunted. I'm not even sure if that's the right word when you're thinking about these systems and these underground tunnels and things like that. In the United States alone, even thinking about in the area I live in, it has a great deal of underground tunnels, and it's all for like they do a lot of storage and things like that. But you can literally drive through them in a semi. And I had a friend who was a truck driver, and he reports that they would pull up, and there was a great deal of security about it, but they would be taking great deals of freight down into these tunnels. But just the obscurity of it, and that you don't know that underneath your feet, all this churning around and going on with space for something to occupy besides just worms and so on and so forth. And then just the vast, and we've, this is up for discussion a lot, but it's basically a whole nother, if you take the entire Earth and then do a tunnel system and underground cities within that same surface area, you have 2 Earths in one at least, depending on the depth, of occupation of whatever type of entities or anything else. So I think it's really complicated. And then, I mean, so this is actually a huge topic. It's actually a really huge topic, and I guess we knew that, but you don't know it till you start actually talking about it, and you're like, oh yeah, this is massive, discussion.
Yeah, we could if you want to, we could do this again next. We could cover this again in our next couple of shows as well. If you want to, I'd be fine with that. I'm sure we can find more to talk.
Yeah, whatever you want to do. But
yeah,
it is interesting.
I think that sounds
good. The treasure hoarding. Matt Sal mentioned treasure hoarding, and real quick, like that old idea. Initially, the idea that a dragon had an egg is the story I always heard. The mythos I always heard. The dragon had an egg, and then some knight, went to go fight this dragon and stole the egg, and ran off with it. And the dragon's chasing him ever since. And so that's as far as that with that mythology. I don't know the exact. I'd have to. We never actually plan to talk about any of these specific things. It kind of just happens real organically, so there's not really a way. But no, I think so. That's mythology about the dragons guarding something, or that we have taken something, or that something has taken something from these creatures, and they're pursuing it to get it back. It ties into the idea of why people have souls and what is immortality, and it's all tied into that, and that's the treasure. Now, the analogy a lot of times is that it usually looks like a big trunk of gold or something, but it's like an analogy of sorts. You know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you think about eggs, I mean, usually whatever comes out of an egg is going to be valuable. Eggs themselves, I mean,
Yeah.
whether it's nothing comes out of it, you still have usually, in one way, it's food. I mean, not to be gross or whatever, but you, people, people and other beings and other animals, they eat eggs. That's just something that is a natural food for animals, for creatures. But also, if you think about that as, again, it's pretty symbolic if you have basically a miniature, in one way, like a miniature womb inside of a giant womb. In other words, you have this egg that's in the center of this, it's in buried in the, or not buried, but deep down in this cave. It's really, there's a lot there going on with that. And yeah, the modern use of, I think that would probably be a good thing to talk about next time too, in more detail, is the more modern or recent use of caves and all the ideas surrounding all of that. But yeah, I've heard of that, caves being used for storage of things, and because of the way you can control, or the way caves can be easily kept in a certain way to make it almost like environmental control systems, but it's a natural version of that. Or they
Yeah.
could easily augment it. So, and I do the other places. I've heard different parts of the world where when people got there and to explore areas, like colonizers or whatever, people from other countries like Europe or whatever, whenever they got to parts of the world further out here and down south, like Southern America, Central America, other places, the locals would say, "Well, we didn't build this building or that cave. The buildings down underground in this area, we didn't build those. We found those and we used those." And I believe I've heard that about multiple locations, which is just
Yeah.
an amazing. And of course, that's written off by people who figure, "Oh, that can't be." But how do we know? We really don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like, the other thing with the caves, the idea that I heard one mythos too. There's so much of this, and we'll have to like link it or or something, I guess. But the idea that this a big origin story about the human being going into a cave. At one point, there was some time when humanity could communicate with the animals through like a sort of telepathy, and there was no need to hunt, and there was all of this sort of talk in this mythology. And I don't remember what the mythology was now. I have to look it up again to like find it. But the human being, or the creature before the human being, went into a cave, and what came out was the human being. The human being came out of the cave different than it was. And then in all of the rituals they talk about with initiations and a lot of the secret societies and things like that, or a lot of just tribal mysticism, they go journeying into the caves. So people say underneath Egypt, like underneath the pyramids, there's just a great cave system where there's a lot of spiritual workings that are done that are meant to be transformative and to represent walking through hell and coming out of it again, and, facing all this terror of the cave. So there's just so much symbology with it. Every way, every which way there is. Like you're saying.
Yeah, I really wonder too now. I mean, if being in caves for long enough could somehow make it easier for people to tap into abilities like telepathy and all that, with maybe with the enclosed environment. I don't know if there's something about the stone, the minerals in the stone, could also, I don't know, but I'm just curious now about the idea of maybe the act of being in a cave system for long enough could lead to abilities like that, or make it easier for people to access those abilities that we supposedly, depending on who you talk to, people do have. It's just that we've lost touch with those over time.
Yeah. Okay. Matt Sal mentioned the cauldron. in the chat. The cauldron is the tool of the cave. I've heard something about too, like something called the eternal flame. That people had, or I don't know if people is the right word. I don't know if it was people or if it was some type of pre-people or whatever it was. But the idea of the eternal flame is exactly, I've heard about that. That it was some type of, I would guess, a gas or something. But essentially that it burned eternally and wouldn't go out. And there was, so there's that too. Of like, can you imagine just like being down 300 feet under the surface in these cave systems, and it's lit by like some type of, I wouldn't assume natural gas, but some type of gas, because there's also, I mean, that's all like, you know, beyond this conversation right now, but yeah, so it's, I don't know, there's like a whole world with it, but then yeah, there's so much to talk about, you know.
Yeah, I've heard of that too. That idea of flames being in places where there's no, where the air is, there's no airflow and all that as well. Even though that's amazing to me. And I feel like I've heard of that idea in as it relates to like the pyramids in Egypt, where they've when they found the rooms and everything, there wasn't any evidence of like I guess soot or any evidence of the remains of torches or of usual traditional flames, the way we think of them being made. I don't know. I'm very vague on that. I have no idea what the
I know
details
what
are.
you mean. I know what you
Yeah.
mean. Like there's anthracite coal. It's a ignition. It's a really a coal that's really deep down in the ground. We talked about it on your birthday in the chat, like when we did the after show chat. But anthracite coal, its ignition is like 900 degrees Fahrenheit, but it can burn completely clean, no soot, no smoke. It's really interesting, and it can burn. It's like a blacksmithing coal. And then that makes me think too of the Tommy knockers. You know, that's also that would be a cave cryptid. So even the Tommy knockers, like the idea of that, ties into the whole cave mythos. The cave systems are lit with information about, you know, at least something to draw curiosity. And it's such a big topic. It's just so much that we're gonna have to be all over the place till we can really narrow it down, I guess. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Well,
a great topic, James.
yeah, we will
I'm glad.
definitely get to that. We still have a couple minutes left here because I started late, but we'll definitely get into the more current versions of all that next week. Like, we haven't even touched on the whole idea of possible alien, other. I don't know, not necessarily otherworldly, but just other beings. Like we have
Yeah.
been talking about it, but the more, I guess, modern idea, or the idea of more modern places like that, we haven't even touched on that yet. But yeah, Tommy knockers. A lot of people will think of that as spirits, and I think that is a possibility of, or that is one possibility of what those could be. But we don't know for sure if it could also be other beings that are making those sounds to either get attention, to warn, or to lure people to these places. I've heard of that associated with buildings that were built on top of mines, which is a whole
Yeah.
other kind of cave. Well, it's a uh, depending on which mine it is. It was either caves that were discovered or caves that were made, or both. And having this tapping sounds coming up from below, and having it mean different things. So that's we do have like about a minute left. But if you want to talk about that, Jen, then we'll end for today.
It's really exciting to think about. I mean, it's kind of scary, and like, but it's exciting to think about. I think because we're so limited, you know, with just the. I mean, with the surface world, you know, we're thinking about the world we're living in, but the idea that there could be another world beneath our feet, and that it's busy, there's something going on there. That a lot of that stuff is all blocked off. And you can't, you have to go with the guides, and you have to have certain licenses to even go down into some of them. Like a lot of the caving systems, you have to have permission to do so. It's dangerous. But it could be something else too. It couldn't be just that. It could be, well, in addition to it being dangerous and needing to be notified that you're going to go do so, that, I mean, what if there are, you know, I don't know, it's just full of so much wonder. So it's an incredible topic, and I'm glad you decided that was I mean, it's a great idea to think about, but it's just so much, trying to, yeah.
And I think it'll be a good idea to keep this going next Saturday. So we will do that.
Definitely.
Thank you again for being here, Jen.
Thank you so much,
Sorry.
James, and have a good night. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. And that is it for this episode. Thank you all for listening. I will talk to you next time on Salsido Paranormal. Take care.